So I think from a measurement basis, what I always hear marketers say is like, oh, measurement's here to justify budget.
Yeah, we do say that,
right?
yes.
But actually, why do we need to justify budget?
It's not about justifying the budget. We own the growth mentality. We are the ones driving the business.
Whether you're working with a COO or CFO, how would you approach this problem if you were them, and how hence would you want to operate marketing in a commercial context?
For marketers, one of the key things that they can do is take that data and actually give insights to it. In plain English, that we can take action.
The truth is that in most companies, data exists, but people don't change anything.
We have so many numbers on a dashboard. What do you do with them? Welcome to the CMO Office Podcast. My name is Nikki Taylor. I'm the APAC Marketing and Communications Director for Analytic Partners and your host today. Today's guest is Frank, the VP of Commercial at PRISM Plus, Singapore's homegrown consumer electronics challenger. Founded in 2017, PRISM Plus has grown rapidly with direct-to-consumer models, strong margins, and a willingness to change how traditional brands think about retail, pricing, and marketing. In this episode, we'll explore what that actually looks like in practice, from live commerce and retail expansion to the realities of measurement, experimentation, and making decisions without perfect data. Welcome, Frank.
Thanks for having me.
All right, great. So we're going to get going here. I'm super excited to dive into these questions, especially with your background in commercial. The first one I want to know is PRISM Plus has grown really quickly and it's very profitable in a very competitive category. Can you explain how the business actually works today across the D2C, retail, and the different platforms? So talk to me about online, offline, all those different things.
Yeah, first off, thanks for the introduction. And I should qualify, I've been here for only 6 months, so I can't take, credit for anything mentioned, but I'm happy to share, what I've seen so far. So I think the main agenda of PRISM Plus is quite simple. As a direct consumer company, we essentially bring value to the customer by cutting out middleman fees, which, it's nowadays we think it's a concept with firms like us. Singapore will be like Secret Lab. Globally, you have lots of big firms as well. But I think the first version of that really was Dell back in the day, where they brought direct selling to their hardware and computers, I think in the 90s or even earlier. And similar model for us, I think we bring that across to initially online first model through our website, and eventually the distributed model through essentially physical availability with retail, and of course, online availability through marketplaces, which is where you shop as well for many home appliances. So for us, I think a lot of our goal is to build on the initial innovation we've had in working closely with our internal design, R&D, and contract manufacturers to bring across new home appliances. We've launched things like vacuums, laundry racks recently, and our goal really is to always find a spot in the market that has a unique gap. And the gap can honestly be, for me, it's quite fascinating to learn as well, right? As someone who's been far away from home appliances, honestly, I don't feel like I made any decision in the last 10 years. Like, for example, laundry racks, the main spot in the market was, wow, when you look at all these laundry racks in the market, you realize that all of them have a little cover at the grill. It sounds so obvious, but that cover actually is there because there's a motor on top. What that means is when your laundry rack essentially dries your clothes, it prevents the clothes from being dried uniformly because there are parts with the grill, there's heat coming from the grill, and then there's part that is blocked by this cover. So for us, our goal was always, can we go to market with an affordable, yet 100% grill model, which we eventually did, of course.
Okay, so basically the model that you've gone is back in the day of Dell, direct to consumer, but really looking for those niche and those gaps and leveraging those for your direct to consumer platforms across obviously your website, but now you've gone into distribution and also retail as well.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned in our prep call that you use a mix of platform testing. Some is incrementality, some is MMM. For people that don't know what MMM is, It's marketing mix modeling. But what you said on the call was that it's not perfect or fully mature in any way. So what does the measurement actually look like for you on a day-to-day basis as a marketer?
Yeah. Would love to take this micro and then more macro if I could as well.
Great. So
maybe on a direct basis to answer the question, for us, it's a lot of doing constant testing, whether it's through your macro, I would say biannual MMM studies, right? We do those with partners, of course, third party or with your channel your typical channels like Meta, Google as well. And then we do your always on, right? Always on will be your conversion lift testing, your search lift, and all those things across platforms. And I would say that gives us a good idea of directionally where things are going. Where I think it gets a little complicated and why I would always want to take it directionally is because as we get more complex as a business, and honestly, before I joined, I did think, how complex can a business selling electronics be? But surprisingly so. So for example, if we do conversion lift or MMM, saying that, for air cons, for example, we may not have a very clear and linear correlation between, as an example, Meta media spend and significant growth in aircon sales. But what if that same study finds that the Meta spend goes towards selling our other categories for some reason?
The halo effect.
Right.
Yep.
And that's going to be the case when you think about the customer, right? Because who are we attracting? Of course, you have people who are looking for, appliance replacements, but many of them are new homeowners looking for a premium but, high value way to fill out their home. And while they may not be always ready for an aircon purchase, they could be looking at many other types of appliances in the home, from TVs to fridges. So I'm guessing this is exactly what's going on. That's what we have heard on the ground as well. And I would say this essentially brings me out to the macro, right? I think on the macro, it's, how do you feel your customer is interfacing with your distribution base? What are they telling you through all your different channels?
Yep.
And also I think from a measurement basis, what I always hear marketers say is like, measurement's here to justify budget, right? Justify.
Yeah, we do say that,
right?
yes.
But actually, why do we need to justify budget?
Love that.
In my world, there's actually no world that we need to justify, because marketers, if we are the business, and we are the business driver, right? And the commercial driver, we would want to spend exactly how much the business wants to spend at any point in time. And of course, similar to the business, if there's any incremental outcome to be had, we would want to spend it as well. So in my mind, it's not really about justifying, and I'd love to share more stories about this if we have time, but really about, aligning with the business, like, hey, at any point in time, I think exactly how a strategic finance person would think, and we would only, distribute budget across channels based on that measurement.
So just to sum it up for our marketers, because I think it's some really great points there. To sum up, you're saying it's not about justifying the budget. We own the growth mentality. We are the ones driving the business, and therefore budget is needed to drive growth. And I think the other key point is, like you said, you think like a CFO, you're not thinking like a marketer. So everything you do, you want a return on investment for that $1 that you put in. What are you getting back out? I think the other interesting points that you sort of alluded to there for the marketers is that on a day-to-day basis, you're looking at the dashboards in Meta and all the different channels, but then you're zooming out with additional data from like your MMM studies that are saying, okay, based on other factors that we see, we understand that the halo effect of the brand is working because of this or that, and that's why this is going up or down. So I think that's really good for people to understand.
Yeah, I could share an excerpt on that.
Yeah, go for it.
If you like. So interesting one I faced, maybe this was like 7-8 years ago, was when Uber IPO'd, there's obviously a lot of pressure to justify, since we like that word, right? Our media spend globally. And I recall, obviously, there was a lot of pressure. Uber's global market share #1, in most of our APAC markets, which I was managing, also #1. Why do we need to spend any money to acquire people we already have, right?
I love when they say that. They're like, why do you need more money?
Right.
Because we need to continue to grow.
Yeah. So one of the most interesting, I think, examples to me, and I myself also had some doubts, like, why would we spend money on such brand for such an established brand, right? Especially in a market like Australia, New Zealand, or other ones like India, Japan. So obviously, the whole business thought that search brand was a waste of money, right? And we were like, okay, that's the first port of call. Everyone's just going to do search brand incrementality. And the results actually showed that it was incremental. And then here comes the resistance. We have scientific numbers here.
Okay.
It's proven according to a number of regression models, but we don't think it's correct.
Why is that?
Right, as in we meaning the business.
Okay.
Right, the business simply it takes a more colloquial way of saying me and my mates know PRISM. Me and my mates know Uber. Sorry. Why would we want to bid on terms that we would have organic rank for? And I think eventually what I was sharing the business is that, again, right, zooming out to understand why a consumer and the market is playing. You don't think like, oh, what is the data showing us, or how do you feel with your mates? But more specifically, Uber has become not a brand term, but a generic term, right? It's what the entire market uses
Yes.
to bid on ride sharing. It's just that simple, right?
True.
We're going to take an Uber, right? It's just synonymous with ride sharing. So because the entire industry in the markets we operate in bidded on the word Uber, the simple defense of that term would ensure that we significantly increase costs for everyone else that's trying to play there. And that was the only reason why it was incremental. And we could get that if you really looked into like competitive studies. You could look into that when you look at, how daily search patterns or, SOV changes when you vary your spends. You could look at that from across Google, not just Google actually, but across like Bing even and even Apple search, where you have the App Store, of course. And I think that was really what revealed. And of course, speaking to customers who actually say like, yeah, I mean, that the way I discover stuff is just searching Uber. But if a cost-efficient alternative comes up, we're not loyal.
That is so interesting that, you're so curious, because I think, like you said, they didn't accept the data to begin with. It showed incrementality was there. It should be the right direction. And the curious marketer knew, went, well, why is that? And by digging into the whys is how you found out like Uber was a generic term. And you're right. Like when you step back and you uncover that, you go, yeah, it makes perfect sense. But until you come to that conclusion, and as most marketers, I think, don't do that extra step. So I really commend you of being a curious marketer to get through, because that's how you've been able to say, this is the data that was given to me. It was directional. But through that, I was able to get more insights and really be able to have a decision that was going to make sure that I had the best bang for my buck. So that's a really great example for marketers to hear. I love that. Now, Frank, you said something interesting, that dashboards are useless if they can't explain in simple English terms. Can you expand on that for me a little bit?
Yeah, of course. The earlier case I think we shared about search brand is a little bit alluding to that, where we have the numbers, but if you can't explain to people the whys, it may not come across clearly and make your point, I think, apparent to the business. But I think in short, on a more day-to-day basis, I sometimes see just pure, especially in the world of AI, right? It's just like pure Claude or OpenAI churn, which is like X% Y dollar, Z% A dollars, and then those are all like your daily, weekly, monthly reports.
Yep.
But I rarely see an ability to go into the so what, right? Like, what does this actually mean if you have, like CTR is up or CVR is down or conversion rate is down, CPC is high? Can you actually put it into simple terms like, we're facing saturation in creative. We got to find new creative angles because we are not adapting to Meta's Andromeda algorithm, right? That's changing data into simple English. And I find like I don't see that often these days, maybe because there's just so much data and so little time to spend investigating into what's going on.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that's a big part of what would drive increase incremental growth in today's.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is, for marketers, one of the key things that they can do is take that data and actually give insights to it in plain English, that we can take actionable results on it, which would drive incrementality, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think you're right. I mean, I've coached many of my teams before, and it is about, like you said, the why, the so why, and what does that mean? We have so many numbers on a dashboard. What do you do with them? It's great. You could repeat that time and time again, but if there's no question behind it that leads to a decision, why are we doing it, right?
Yeah.
I don't know about you. I used to, some reports at UPS, we used to have a lot. So occasionally if we thought no one was reading it, we used to stop doing it for a couple of weeks and see if anybody asked for it, and if they didn't, then we never brought it back. I don't know if you
I've
did
tried
that.
it before as well.
Yeah.
It
It's
didn't
amazing.
always work though. It didn't always work.
It didn't always work.
Or in converse, maybe it did always work because it told you when people do appreciate the report.
Well,
right?
that's
If
true.
they want it back.
That's
so
true.
maybe it does always work.
I did have one where it came back a year later, and I was like, well, we didn't do it for a year, so it can't be that important. Too bad. Excellent. All right. So moving along, you spend a lot of time in stores, actually, and talking to customers, which from a customer experience person, I love. I love hearing from the customer. But how do you bring those qualitative insights into the business that's really so data driven. I think a lot of marketers focus on that. There's so much qualitative data, and then how do they match that up with all the online data that they see?
Yeah, that's a good point. So first off, I think it's so great to speak to customers, right? You get an understanding of what's going on the ground, what they're facing, what the real life problems you're solving are. And of course, what you want to ensure is that you're not conflating what you're hearing with at scale issues if they are genuinely isolated. So I think you're really understanding, how generalizable is an insight.
Okay.
And I think the good news is a lot of times, if you look hard enough, you can find ways that it corresponds, right? So I'm just thinking back to Uber, like one of the most common qualitative insights, or rather technically quantitative, but it feels qualitative almost, is that people in Japan kept going to our how it works page, right? So just uber.com/ or uber.com.jp/how it works.
Yep.
And you would think like, wait, why don't people know how Uber works? It's just, you open an app, you just tap a button, boom, all right. And it turns out that people there are just very focused and accustomed, this was obviously 6-8 years ago, on phone hailing.
Okay.
And we already knew that from speaking to people.
Yep.
But no one actually went to check how does that correspond to how they're interacting with their website.
Okay.
Right. And we saw them constantly bounce between install page and how it works. And they just kept bouncing and bouncing and bouncing. So we realized that people just need to be told hey guys, you get the ETA up front. You get the price up front. You get to share your trip with a friend. Things like that, today we take for granted, I know.
Yep.
But that was literally the marketing campaign that came out of this insight.
Okay. So that was the step further. So basically off the back of, you had the qualitative that you were hearing this, correlated it with something that you saw online, and the action was you implemented a campaign.
Exactly.
Okay. And how did that campaign go?
Yeah, it was actually one of the first times I learned the impact of a brand campaign on a performance result.
Right.
At that time, I was still within the overall media team where we did both brand and performance media.
Yep.
But we didn't drive, obviously, the brand agenda per se.
Okay.
Right, that was driven by our CMO for the region, basically. So after conversing on this insight I shared earlier, he drove this campaign, got the specific key messages and propositions, tested it out as you will. And then that's when we first saw, oh, wow, CPA is down by 50% afterwards. That was why I was like, oh, okay. Now we're talking.
So that cemented that going forward. So now you love talking to customers.
That's right.
And I think the key takeaway from there is the qualitative is your why as well. So it helps consolidate the why of what you're trying to search for with the rest of the data. Now, Frank, I'm going to go back to PRISM Plus here because one of the things you've called out is how technically complex the products are and how unique the customer use cases are for them. How does that change your marketing approach? Because we talked about that in the pre-call. Can you give me a little bit more on that? Right.
And I guess that's where we start to see things tie to each other, right? It's also part of the previous conversation we just had around the interfacing with customers in the retail environment. I think that's sometimes we have, as marketers, we have this tyranny of knowledge, right? I keep trying to say that to my product team especially. Tyranny of knowledge is we assume that everyone gets, for ceiling fans, what a wingtip blade versus a leaf blade versus what a downrod versus a hugger. Who knows these things?
You do now.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's so interesting because when I speak to people in stores, they're not, drop-ins, most of them, right? These are people, you don't walk in to look at a ceiling fan just cause you feel like it.
Yeah.
You walk in because you have a clear use case. Someone told you to get a fan or you have clearly a need to get a fan for your new house. And you're like, how do I resolve all these decisions I need to make in a simple and clear manner that would allow me to spend a few $100s.
Yep.
And I think that's where on our site we haven't had the owners, and I think we have to do a lot more. I think we're hopefully doing it already in providing a lot more edutainment.
Okay.
Right. I think PRISM Plus is a brand, in my view, has been more focused on the entertainment side, and I think for good reason, right? You need to get our name out there as a brand. We need to engage audiences. In the past, our audiences were younger as well. But now as our audience goes towards, your sort of middle and older, large households, these are people that would typically index a lot on trust, right? A lot on discussing with their family members, does this work for them?
Okay.
And I think that's when we really understand, okay, this is where we put out clear DIY videos, how-to videos on why that you would choose your door lock or your ceiling fan in a specific configuration. Here's how you would use specific vacuum attachments to manage not just your floor, but also your carpet, your car, your sofa, and things like that.
That's amazing.
And of course, the good thing about having retail presence is you can load those videos in the store.
Yeah, okay.
And you immediately get some feedback on it as well.
That's a great segue, Frank, because Prism Plus started as a D2C business, but you've invested really heavily in retail, physical stores recently. Why does retail matter so much now? Why the change?
Great timing, because I just did a big immersion into this topic, right?
Great.
And I think it's one that I think is heavily questioned as well in the past, not just in Prism Plus, but in any brand I've seen, where when you expand your distribution, is it truly incremental, right? Just to a macro view, like when I was in a large consumer goods company like Reckitt, every day we will question, why would you spend time selling online when we have Fair Price, we have Cold Storage, we have Watsons, we have medical marketing, and they're like, online just took money from offline. You guys didn't earn any money. And I think same thing here, right? I think we always need to consider that offline could be taking money from online.
Yeah,
we should be thinking that.
Yes.
And I think that's why we see interesting patterns. Patterns such as, wow, we sell a lot more extended warranty through stores.
Yep.
A huge percentage difference more. We sell a lot more high value items, especially things that, and I just learned this concept, that require good viewing distance. So when you're buying a premium TV, we do sell premium TVs, right? We do have TVs that are more than 2,000, and you got to go into the store, you got to have nice viewing distance to understand, right, wow, there is no reflection on this TV. It truly has extremely crisp color gamut. Things I didn't know before I joined, but those are words that people look out for and care about.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of it. We even saw things like when people went to stores, they just love opening all the fridges. Like that's the one thing I see people do all the time. Just like fridge 1 to fridge 8, just gotta open all of them, right?
Okay.
But it makes sense because they're thinking, how do I put I think in Singapore we like to use the word, this marketing is also buying groceries from the market. It's an old school term. And I'll hear my parents' generation say that, right? How do I fit all my marketing into this? I came back with like 5 bags of groceries in the car, right?
Yep.
Where do I put all my frozen food? So I think that's how they're processing all these and why offline is so important to us. It also honestly gives me a final angle of, we just spoke about the customer interaction.
Yes.
Literally just last night, I had this like long thought around a very simple hypothesis, which is that I have not justified this in any way, to be clear, but I believe there's a very strong linear relationship between the market share of any electronics company in Singapore and how many successful customer interactions, a person-to-person customer interaction that they have. And by successful, I mean something that a customer would, for example, just rate as an NPS above 8.
Yep.
Right? Something that they genuinely enjoy, they found value from, and they understood how to buy a product. I think the adage that we always say is that confused customers don't buy. And I think that's the big part of retail. It's there to unconfuse / educate customers and support them in buying a whole home worth of products, where we see the basket size significantly growing today.
Interesting. So if I play that back, basically the retail expansion is it's incrementality, because these type of products require that experience. They're a little bit more premium. People want to feel them, see them, touch them. And that's where you're seeing the goal. I agree with you. I've had that conversation in my past companies of, online is taking off offline and versus that. But I think this is great. You've actually realized, no, online is for these type of products more likely. You might get a few of the bigger ones, but most of them are going to be in store, and that's why the retail makes sense.
Right. Just recall a little tidbit, if I may.
Yep.
So I just mentioned earlier at the start, we launched this new category, laundry, right? And I love this one partially because I bought it. So I'm kind of personally invested with my own money. But also, super interesting data, right? We took some time to have it in stores because it requires quite a lot of installation, quite a lot of, when you have false ceiling, you need poles and all that. I don't know all the logistics. But the data showed we sold, before it was in any store, 30% of our laundry rack sales was from stores.
Okay.
So you will go to a store, there is no laundry rack, and you would purchase it. So that simply tells me, back to my hypothesis earlier, what they simply needed is a successful person-to-person conversation they couldn't have online. They were
still asking the conversation in person to explain it to them. Yep, okay.
And honestly, if I were to take a step back, like our retail person is also fresh. They haven't seen the laundry racks in store.
Yeah.
All they're doing is going to our monitor, opening the laundry rack page and talking through it. That's all they're doing.
It's so true that, I mean, my husband does that too. We have to go to the store to look or whatever. Like we'll do the online search, but we'll go to the store because we have to go to the store.
Right.
And then, you know, 1 or 2 stores to talk, still all of that sort of thing. It still happens today. And I think, like you said, it's that physical touch and being able to imagine it in your house. Like you said, the families come in, open up all the fridge doors because they're thinking like, where do I put my fruit? Where do I put my meats? I totally agree with that. So I want to build on that. And I want to know how much of your growth actually happens offline and how confident are you that your online marketing is driving it? Because we just talked about how, you know, I will look at things online, but then still go to the store. So take me through that.
The CMO Office is brought to you by Analytic Partners, the global leader in marketing mix modeling and commercial analytics, which turns data into expertise to help marketers make an impact in the C-suite. What kind of impact? Last year, every dollar spent on Analytic Partners, we returned $70 in incremental revenue. Find out more at analyticpartners.com.
Yeah, so maybe taking a step back for the audience, PRISM Plus today we have 8 stores in Singapore, all across the island. And of course I can't share the specifics, but it's grown in terms of, you know, share of contribution significantly over the last 2 to 3 years or so. And I think what's happy obviously is that every time we launch a new store, or most significantly a store expansion in an existing store, so that's essentially, you know, either doubling your square meter or just increasing it by about 1.5x, it always increases the net sales of a geographical or postal code area.
Really?
That's the way we used to measure. It's, you know,
so
if something increases, if something launches, it doesn't take away online sales from that area, but does actually contribute to it.
Okay.
And that's honestly quite possible because one weakness we've had, and I'm trying to fix it, right, is we haven't had this concept of retail-only promotions.
Yep.
And that means for a customer, you can walk away from the store, buy online, and you get the same price.
Yes.
So actually, if anything, I think it's the reverse. We're
Okay.
probably under-attributing offline because our products are naturally high consideration, right? I mean, I have personally seen a lot of sales happen in store. I mean, huge, right? But at the same time, I've seen a lot of people walk away, and occasionally they do give us their contact number or phone information to follow up, like, hey, you know, we spoke about this. I may need to find you again on more questions on the warranty. And sometimes when I do check, they have purchased it online.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there's this very nice online to offline to online dynamic. I feel like we should definitely measure, but not overdo the measurement to be like, oh, you know, every dollar we spend, how much is it actually earning offline?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, we talk about channel synergy all the time. So that's a great point that you make. And for me, it's really the channel synergy you have of the offline and the online, you know, the interplay between them is what's driving the sales. So, you know, I know from my own experience, I've gone into the stores and then sometimes you're just not quite ready. And then, like you said, if the price is the same, I'd probably just do it online and the convenience is there. It'd be interesting. You'll have to come back and tell me if you run a test of only in-store promos, what happens there. But I think it's clear regardless that the channel synergy is in play for you guys here, which is great. Now, I'm going to switch gears here a little bit, and it's a topic that I love to talk about because I don't know much about it, other than I'm a consumer of it, which is live streaming. So you're running around 40 live streams a month across platforms like TikTok and Shopee. What role does the live commerce play in your overall strategy? Can you elaborate the role, and then take me through, give me some stats?
Right. Funny you ask because it almost feels like podcasting is the B2B version of live streaming. But that's how I think about it.
Could be.
But I think live streaming is so interesting. Like, you know, back when I was in e-commerce, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, 5-6 years, every business wanted to do it.
Yes.
Every boss certainly wanted to do it.
Yes.
But it wasn't seeing a lot of results back then, honestly.
Okay.
I had to do some myself. I had to persuade colleagues to do it.
You did live streaming yourself?
Yes.
How did that go? So I'm just going to pause and ask that first. Like, how did that go?
Back then it was, you would always work with like a partner like a Lazada or a Meta, right? And Lazada would like, they'll invite you to their warehouse somewhere deep in Tuas, and you got to go there late at night. And you got to put on your game face and like look at milk formula for 1 hour and like, this is amazing. This milk formula, right? You got to get it. And I think I remember how we did it was like we co-opted all the fathers. Like anyone who's a parent, you got to sell the milk formula online. But yeah, of course we did have, I think eventually, thankfully the industry, the world started catching up, and we had the concept of affiliates.
Right.
Thankfully, people realized, I can earn big money doing this.
Yes.
Why not? And people started switching out. They realized they could do it. They went full time, and I think that brings us to today, where live streaming has honestly become a big extension of our essentially everything we've spoken about today, right? Like our edutainment play. It brings about, entertaining way of sharing products, but not in a typical advertising, copywriting mode, but very, very colloquial in Singapore.
Yep.
They're very casual. And honestly, like the best performing streamers are by far the most colloquial and casual.
Okay.
Right? We've definitely seen that in our results.
Yeah, okay.
And I think also the key part is sometimes obviously people can't spend time to go down to store, or the time that they're available to interact with your brand is a time that's 10 p.m. at night.
Yep.
Right. Or interestingly, we found that recently we haven't done too much into it, but we've realized a lot of companies do it at 10 a.m. as well.
Okay.
And apparently the insight why they do it at 10 a.m. I haven't tried it to fully justify, but it's because they know that it's again a long purchase cycle. So nothing will sell at 10 a.m. Nothing.
Okay.
Right. But the entire purpose of that stream is to ask customers to come back for the 7 p.m. stream, where there's better vouchers and they've decided with their spouse or partner or
smart.
family members by then. So I think that's where we're seeing live streaming go towards. And I think ultimately it's a lot like I forgot what's the word for it, but I think it's infomercials back in the day.
Yeah, that's what I see them as infomercials.
Right?
It is like that.
It really
right?
is like that. And of course, the only difference is that you have people actively engaging. It's a two-way conversation.
Yep.
Right? People ask, show me this vacuum. Show me this product. And I think it's fun because, like, for us at least, live streaming has become also really useful to just showcase new products, right? That you otherwise may not see through, just word of mouth or awareness or ads and things like that. Things we may have low budget in, but a high demonstration. Robot vacuums, I think, is one that comes to mind. Very demo based. Right? Or even just handheld vacuums. We love those. And nowadays, things are changing so fast. There's something called a wet and dry vacuum, where you essentially can interchange your nozzle of the vacuum. You click in a nice wet and dry attachment. That's essentially a wet roller mop.
Okay.
And how do you use it, right? Where do you put in the water? Where's the detergent? How does it work? Where do you off it? What's the modes? Like, all that can be done through live streaming. So it's a huge weight off our chest. We're like, we don't have to think so much about the content because we see how it progresses through the streams, and that's a great way for us to adapt our content later.
I love that. So if I'm a CMO listening and I need to know tips about live streaming, I think there's some great ones there, which is, number one, if it's got time that needs to go check with your spouse, 10 a.m. could be a good lead up to have the vouchers at 7 o'clock. That's a pretty good trick there. But what I think I do hear the most takeaway is that it's really good for that educational side of things, that people can sort of experience it. And because of the way that social media and live streaming goes, they can actually ask, like, can you move it to the right, to the left? And they can ask questions in that two-way sort of dialogue, which sort of brings that, what we were talking about before in store, that two-way dialogue en masse a little bit more. And then, like you said, it's sprinkled in a little bit of entertainment with the local presenters being the ones that do better. So I think there's some really good tips for CMOs on live streaming. I'm always so fascinated about it, and I do buy. Actually, I don't really buy from live stream. I just normally buy on TikTok. But
so far,
yeah, you're right. So far, I mean, maybe I'll see that they'll pop up on my phone. All right. Well, you talked about both hacky marketing with small budgets, which I love because I'm all about hacking with small budgets, and more structured approaches at scale, which I think is absolutely the right way. But I want you to tell me in your words, how do you balance those experiments and the discipline to, test it out and then scale big?
Yeah. So a big part of, I think, what I like to do in a team is not just the marketing tactics and the strategy, but how do you manage the team and the mentality of the team in general.
Yeah.
We want to obviously think big, but we want to start small and move fast as well.
Yes.
So thinking big ensures that you have the end goal in mind. You know what, is this a high impact item or not? But starting small and moving fast ensures that, you don't just wait for the next 2 meetings to get this sorted, right?
Yep.
You think about how fast can you execute, what's the minimum viable experiment. And almost like the most simple example that always comes to mind, even though it may not be a great one, is my previous experience in a startup. So back then I was working in a health tech startup, and we were starting a new chain of physical wellness clinics. And a big part of it was really that the team managing the clinics obviously wanted to manage the appointments via website and email. And obviously, my goal was to drive lead generation and appointments. And a big part I just wanted to say is like, let's just do a Google Maps listing and have a phone number. That sounds so obvious. Like, why wouldn't you have it?
Yes.
But there's a lot of resistance back then. Like, we don't want to man the phone number. We're busy. We're flying email. and everyone was just stuck in this like loggerhead. And I was like, okay, it's just going to be my phone number. So I just put my phone number in all 4 clinics across the island. So I got like, I think on the first day I got like 20 calls. So I just walked up to my founder. I was like, I got 20 calls today. I booked 18 appointments. Do you want us to continue or do you want to lose 18 appointments tomorrow? You decide.
What a great test.
And then gridlock solved.
I love that. I mean, I must admit, I'm a marketer as well that will roll up her sleeves and like let's give it a go and see where we go. What I want to know also, because you've got such a vast experience from startup to Uber to now PRISM Plus, this is one that marketers are always interested in. What would you do with $1,000 budget versus a $1 million budget?
Right.
What would you do?
Wow.
Like if you were, and you can give me the scenario of it's a startup, it's an established brand, or it's a campaign or not, but you got $1,000 in the bank, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Versus you've got 1 million, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Give them the context of what category and everything.
Right. I mean, marketers love this question, right? Maybe I'll just tackle both with the same scenario. Let's say I'm in a startup, and I'll just use that as the same example of like I was in a health tech startup. It was B2B focused. We're selling primarily, while we did have clinics, it was primarily benefits to companies as part of their HR benefits. So I think the position here would be, right, okay, I have $1,000 for a very tiny tactic, or I guess, let's say we had huge fundraising around $1 million to run a big campaign. What would I do? So I think for the $1,000, my favorite tactic by far is, I think, kind of exactly what we're doing now, which is to find the right expert-led content and bring it in front of as many, ideal customer profiles as possible. I mean, it sounds so obvious, but I think the way we did it a lot back in the past was we just had a ton, like huge amount of just LinkedIn ghostwriting for my chief medical officer.
Okay.
Right, like just pumping it out all the time.
Yep.
And then of course, this chief medical officer, thankfully, he's established in the industry. He's a professor. He's got credentials from UK, Germany, and Singapore.
Okay.
So people listen to him.
Yeah.
And when the content goes out there, some of it obviously, like we do, has just tremendous amount of traction compared to the rest. Right? It could be maybe something that we won, it could be an opening that we did, or it could be just an insight from a recent conference that he attended. And we'll just go bananas on using that for LinkedIn ads. Right?
Okay.
Where I think it's caught up these days, but about 1 or 2 years ago, I didn't see that many people using personal content for LinkedIn ads.
Yep.
And it was something that really, really drove a lot of outcomes. And of course, for $1,000, you don't spray and pray, but you really just say, oh, okay, there's a certain group of, top well-being professionals, HR leaders listening to this guy. But who's the other 1,000 people, 10,000 people that you would like to listen? And obviously LinkedIn just gives you audit profiles in many, many ways that you can put together. And $1,000 is actually more than enough, right? If you think about it from a CPM level. So, okay, so that's your campaign sorted. That's actually how we drove a lot of our lead gen.
Okay.
But for $1 million, even though I would say, why don't we just keep doing more of that $1,000 tactic, right? I mean, it's tempting to say that. It's tempting sometimes. Yeah. But I guess we also got to recall, like, okay, at some point, who are we as a brand? Who are we as a company? Okay. And the thing about benefits is that it requires, I think, a certain level of legitimacy amongst your clients, whereby big clients buy big benefits providers.
Yes.
Right? You rarely see like, a P&G is going to like invest in like a 5-man startup who does like fertility technology. No, you never see that at all. Right? So I think that's where essentially I'll use that $1 million to level up, I would say, I don't want to say the word rebranding. I don't think we're going there, but more like a big awareness campaign that pushes, it could be a new launch, a new technology, or redefinition of the brand globally into a much bigger space. And I think a micro version of how I've seen it done in the past, I mean, in reality, how I did it in my previous startup is that, you wouldn't think about a tiny startup running things like TVC, MRT ads, but that was what I used most of the budget on.
Wow.
And I was just like, we got to go big. We got to be legitimate. We got to get, folks like Unilever who is a client now, or AIA, paying attention to us, right? And that's where we really went the legitimate route. We want to go like high production value, high quality content, and just putting it as much out there as possible. So I think that's a nice mix of scrappy, but you reach people, very specific people with very specific content, but also knowing that at some point, the overall perception of then how they research about your company, how they encounter and do additional due diligence matters a lot as well.
Yeah, what's so interesting that you have then, I don't know if you realized it, but both examples you gave, even though one is more tactical, both had a very high degree of sort of brand or thought leadership.
Right.
The first one, like you didn't have the money for the big awareness campaign, but you're still aware that you had to position and have that, credibility at the top. Whereas I think a lot of people would have taken that $1,000 and gone, okay, I'm just going to run ads. And like you said, they weren't the personal style of the personal story ads. So you still brought the brand message and positioning in even for a very scrappy budget, which is great. And then what I also thought was really great was when you scaled up, you went, yeah, well, they need to know why us, and what's that credibility. And now we have more budget. So it's, again, a split of the brand that will help us harvest that when they're ready to go, right? Because we always think about the 3% that are in market and we forget about the 97% that we actually have to pull through, which is really good. All right, I'm going to switch gears a little bit now. And you mentioned that only recently you analyzed something as basic as the impact of out of stock versus pre-order on revenue. Now that I love to hear, because I always hear in marketers, they talk about like pre-orders and how that works and all that sort of stuff. But what did it teach you when you analyzed out of stock versus pre-orders on revenue?
Right. I think the word that comes to mind is predictability.
Okay.
Right. So I think to take a step back, I think the concept of pre-order and out of stock is something I've never seen before my current role.
Yeah.
And I think it's fascinating because in the past, I think we just dealt with it as it is, meaning that, it's out of stock, we stop selling, we just move on.
Yeah.
And then when it's back in stock, great, we'll push it back again. As opposed to thinking, when you're selling to people who are buying appliances for a new home, when do they actually need it?
Yes.
Usually not that soon. Right? Usually it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
True.
Or in Singapore where you're BTO, sometimes months. Right? You have months.
Yeah, months and years.
I do have customers asking for me like, I'm buying it today in April, but can I hold it until September?
Yeah.
But I think coming back to predictability, what we found purely is that instead of just saying, pre-order, get this item in, for example, June, just replacing that with pre-order, get this item by 25th June, completely changes the conversion rate. Right? Even though theoretically 25th June is end June, and saying June is like sort of more vague.
Yep.
Right? So I think the simple thing is that people obviously have a plan, and you got to fit in their plan when you do a pre-order. And also, I think the last thing is that, again, where are you in the customer's journey? Oftentimes, an appliance is the end of a new home journey, right?
Yes.
You think about tiles, you think about furniture. Appliances are then like, I got to fit in the last few things.
Yep.
When do I get it? Right? So I think that's the whole concept where people design their timeline around the contractors and the furniture, and appliances fit into that timeline, not the other way around. So giving that predictability was so important for us, and it's something that no one thought about doing before, but it's great that at least we have the data now, and that tells us like, let's be always, be very sharp and nail, like, here's when you can get it, here's when you can get it. And of course, under promise, over deliver is always good.
Yeah, we love that. Which leads me to my next question, because at Analytic Partners, we talk about commercial analytics rather than just marketing mix modeling. And what that means is that we think about things outside of marketing being supply chain, which we just talked about pre-orders there, but also things like, fuel, macroeconomies, all those sort of things. Even things like for you guys, like World Cups, like I needed TV to watch World Cup. I know we talked about that. These are all things that sit outside of marketing and marketing's control. How do you factor those into your decisions?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And something I love having to reshape my mentality around the last 5 years, right? As I moved to the more commercial role. And I think commercial just teaches you that essentially you just adopt the role of anyone else in the business, right? Whether you're working with a COO or CFO, how would you approach this problem if you were them, and how hence would you want to operate in a marketing or commercial context. So I think to answer your question directly, I think it's quite key to have, the most obvious ones are to build that relationship with the right people in the company, ensure that forums happen not just through an email or Slack, but ensure that the face-to-face time or phone call, you just gotta have it ASAP, but also the right cadence, right? So instead of just always relying on ad hoc stuff, if it's something more macro, for example, a macro item could be, okay, there's a new launch, but the new launch has macroeconomic considerations such as the cost of memory or RAM prices, right? Or potential delays in supply chain, or like you mentioned, other events like the World Cup, right? Then based on all that, how do we come to a decision? So I think that's where we essentially want to do modeling that goes beyond just, how many units can I sell? But it also, based on the total amount of units I can order and manage in my warehouse, right, at any given point in time, what do I actually want to deploy? Right? Because it could be, I could sell so well this month before the World Cup, but then, my warehouse is out of stock in like early June. So we end up net, right? That's a scenario that I've thought about more and more increasingly. And I think the way to go about is really like solid integration of demand planning on one end, which is the supply chain side. And obviously, marketing and budget planning together.
So I'm hearing supply chain. I'm going to push you a little bit further on that question. So, what are the things that you track and what are the things that you just use for direction? And I give you an example. So we work with like insurance, and so things that they definitely track is things like COE prices and things like that. For you, I assume we talk a lot about new houses, so it might be things like are the number of new houses going up and down, or renovations, all that sort of stuff. What are the things that you are a must that you say we have to track, we have to be aware of, versus other things that you say to your team, well, just keep it in the peripheral. If it pops up, great. Like things like the World Cup. Like if it comes up, great, comes on my radar, I'll think about it. But what are the must things and what are the keep in peripherals tracking?
Yeah, great question. I think first off, of course, you mentioned the crux of it, right? Which is that Singapore has a huge amount of this public estate or new house information. It's insane.
It is.
And of course, now with AI, it's so easy to query, right? If once it sits in the database, you can just query it all. So that's, I think, a key thing that we track to ensure that we're on top of anything that's happening. That of course leads to our retail promotions or even potential discussions about what pop-ups or geographical marketing we should do. And I think beyond that, we would also look at anything that are more almost like government-led, right? So those are things like climate vouchers or even macro changes. So I think maybe two-sided one would be, on the government side, it's how they respond to macroeconomic changes with like climate vouchers, CDC vouchers and things like that. But also the weather itself, right? Things that you can't control. That impacts like, during a rainy season, during Chinese New Year, we sold a lot of laundry rags. And then now it's getting hotter. Right. So cooling kind of applications are much more in demand. But did we factor that into our demand planning? Maybe, maybe not. Right. Then that's when we got to respond very quickly to ensure like, do we have it in stock? Is it coming? Is it in the warehouse? So on and so forth. So I think, unfortunately, right now, I think most things are moving towards good to have or must have. Very few things you want to keep in the peripheral because they all affect the kind of demand planning we do.
Yeah, that's great. So in summary, it is all about, macro economies. It's about what the government is putting out there. You're right about the vouchers for green. That's definitely one that plays in there. Moving along, you've worked across lots of different environments that we talked about. So Uber, PRISM Blast. But how comfortable are you operating with incomplete or imperfect data? How do you find that?
Yeah. I mean, the truth is that as marketers, we got to be comfortable with incomplete data, for sure. I think the goal is always to ensure, like, not so much you look at the data and then you do an action, but more like, I mean, that does happen often, of course. But I think most of the time, the truth is that in most companies, data exists, but people don't change anything. I'm quite sure that's the case in most companies, at least in terms of the level of frequency that we look at data, right? Because I think one will look at data at least 20 times a day, but how often do you actually make a key action that changes, your run rate or your media planning? Probably once every couple of days or something. More importantly, I think data is there to build a muscle or muscle memory, right? So the more you ingest data, the more you're just like, okay, you have an idea, like it's just like riding a bike. You get a feel for it. you know, like instinctively, there's that data, there's the qualitative information you've already ingested, and there's almost that additional bit of gut feel that tells you like, okay, based on everything that's happening, I got to make a complex call, and here it is. I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, I think it's a great tip for marketers. What you said there is, basically get comfortable with data, but use it for actions. Don't just look at it. And I love that muscle memory side of things. It's building that muscle of what you understand of what's happening in your category, which is really great. All right, moving on to our very last question, because we've had a great discussion today. If you look at marketers today, especially in D2C and e-commerce, which is your background, what do you think they misunderstand the most about measurement and growth? And what do you wish they would do?
Yeah. I think the most common thing that we would see, especially in slightly smaller units, would probably be more revenue and growth focus as opposed to profit focus, right? I think there was, and I think it's absolutely fair, right? There was a time where, of course, the whole world, especially growth hackers, we were all just like, focus on installs, on trips, on bookings and stuff like that. And that was pretty much the whole like digital economy V2, I think, back in like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But obviously that's moved on. Every firm is now back into, okay, got all these trips, what's the CM, right? The contribution margin, the gross margin around these things. And I think that the complexity as a marketer is understanding that, hey, even though I'm running ads in 40 markets, you have 40 different CM.
Yes.
So how do you ensure that even though you're driving huge volume somewhere, you may be unprofitable, but you're driving small volume but highly profitable? And how do you play between that dynamic? I think that's where you start becoming like a micro strategist or even GM, right? As a general manager kind of thinking like, how would you want to play around with those levers? And I think it comes back to our early conversation on muscle memory, right? Where you've spoken with the business so much that you know how they would prioritize things. And you would also know how the market share would change if you make certain decisions. And I think that's how, marketers, we have to move forward more as business thinkers in the years to come.
Great tip for marketers. I mean, I always say it's about building your portfolio of channels and how they interplay with one another rather than individual ones. I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Frank. It's been a great chat about measurement, about qualitative research, customer experience. I've learned a lot. I'm probably going to go to a PRISM store, maybe buy a clothesline. I don't know. But thank you so much for spending the time today. Really had a pleasure speaking with you.
Please say hi if you see me at the PRISM store.
I will.
Thank you.
Thanks to Frank for joining us and for you to watching and listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, do like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, share it with a colleague, and sign up for our weekly newsletter at the-cmo-office.com. See you next time.